Good evening and welcome to the December event of the Blake Society. And if you're looking for a last minute gift for Christmas, why not give someone the gift of membership of the Society? The Blake Society was founded in 1985, and one of our earliest friends and someone who has contributed to the work of the Society in each of the 5 decades that followed is our guest tonight, Brian Catling. Brian is a sculptor, a novelist, a poet, a filmmaker, a performance artist, and a teacher. He is Professor of Fine Art at the Ruskin School of the University of Oxford. But more than all of this, he mirrors William Blake in the range and the scope of his creativity. And he manifests that question that we find in Blake. What is the provenance of this extraordinary imagination? And tonight, we're going to hear perhaps an answer to that great, ponderous question. So it is with great pleasure that I invite Brian Catling to talk tonight. Avoiding Blake, defeated by a flea in the ear.
Good evening. I hope you're there. A waiting room is a strange place to be. It's generally for something terrible. I'd like to give you an answer. I don't think I can. What I'm going to do tonight is throw several pins to find other pins. I've never compared myself to Blake. I wouldn't have the nerve. I make many things and they self-fertilize, they cross over, they become ways of explaining the thing that went before and sometimes the thing that went before that you forgot. So that's what I'm going to do. You're not going to see much of me doing this, thank God. You're going to see images of things which basically I've made and which have been influenced me and which are mysterious things in themselves. But I started off by doing this by trying to find some logical understanding of how I might explain how Blake influenced me and how some of these ideas and images actually got into the work. And I realized I couldn't do that. So what I did, I invented a kind of Geiger counter, a kind of Blake Geiger counter, a Vala detector, and then held it over my work and waited for it to click, 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 and it went to various things, and I selected those works. And then I'm going to put it up on screen and then talk at them, about them and around them. But they've already been selected by the detector. And it could go wrong. This is the weirdest combination of things I've made put together ever, I think. But it was selected by the detector. So we can begin now. Do we have, this rather poor thing is a badge I wore on my chest for many years. I went to a comprehensive school, rather good one, experimental comprehensive school in the Old Kent Road in South London. The Old Kent Road, of course, leads to Canterbury and was the Pilgrim's route. And the school kind of wanted that to be part of what it was about. And this is my first confusion. I confused Bunyan with Blake at a very early age. The school hymn was to be a pilgrim, but we all sang Jerusalem next or before. And so the two things, can you imagine this? The two things becoming confused. It summons a picture which is so enormous. It it refuses to be separated. I'll come back to this later on. So I didn't know Blake for quite a long time. And when I first saw images, I didn't quite understand why people were showing them to me. I didn't see I had anything to do with this or what it was saying or the sentiment behind it. And then, thank God, the Flea arrived. The Flea changed everything. This stopped me in my tracks. It's one of the most astonishing things I'd ever seen. This tiny little picture. It works in every conceivable way. It's dramatic. It's cinematic. It's got multiple lives, multiple universes, and it's a presence. This is not a vague presence. This is something that's muscular and dangerous. This is something that is prancing across the stage. And I kind of fell in love with it. One of the things I have, which is probably a defect, or I don't think you call them defects these days, they're probably neurological differences or whatever the word is that I can't accept things for what they are. I have to take them on. I have to become part of it. I have to adopt them. I have to take them into my hand and into my heart and into my mind and into my dreaming to understand them. So I have to kind of remake them. I have to find a way to be in that room with that creature and not be seen by it. And this sounds like kind of a fantasy. It's not a fantasy. This picture is so real to me that I'm wondering more about how the stage is made. What is that stage? And what is that thing to the side of the curtain that looks like a cactus? There are things in here that's so odd, and it's all painted on gold. Blake did something here, a series of experiments, putting gold leaf on and then painting over it, which kind of ruined the painting. The painting is falling apart because he put tar, he put chemicals in, but it doesn't matter. This is an alchemical image, both in its structure and its meaning, and it's alive. So I don't have a passive position. So the first thing I made on the way to understanding what I was looking at was the object he's carrying in his hand, the bowl which is there to collect blood. There's no other function. That's what it's for. Therefore, if I could actually structure something, there's not an identical copy, but a kind of remake, a contemporary remake of this thing. And of course, in the process, it becomes cosmological, it becomes planetary. But it is actually, it can be held in the hand, in a rather bigger hand than the human one. And it's a composite object. It's made of different things. It's essentially black perspex and ivory perspex, but it's got steel in it. It's got things, and it also resembles the sort of medieval shaving bowls that used to be carried around the streets of London, where people would strap around their necks and be shaved. There's something domestic in this. There's something known, but it's entered a condition of strangeness. It's no longer a domestic device, but it has recognition. At the same time, literally the same year, I think it was 1988, the Blake Society asked me to make a performance in St James's, Piccadilly. And this is the image that I have. This is the only image I have of it. And my memory is completely gone on it. I remember that on the outside of the church, because the church has parallel clear glass windows, I had 10 people on either side with mirrors to reflect the sun inside to dapple the interior. But what the actual performance was is gone. And I think I'm convinced that the more you write fiction, the more it makes the memory transparent. And this is a classical example. I did find a little tract that said that I was crawling along the aisle. I was being something between the Flea and Nebuchadnezzar, and I found a halo, a gold halo that was made of clay. When I wore this thing, it fell apart. It became soft. It became the wrong material. What these other guys are doing with me, I have absolutely no idea. I know they are, but I'm afraid this picture's gone into a mysterious territory, and I like that very much. I like the fact that I don't own it. And the good thing about performance is you don't own them. The artist doesn't own them. It's gone. It's performed. It's in the memory of the audience. It's in the memory of the audience and in something uh, deeper in their recollection, and perhaps a little bit embedded in the place. At the same time, I had my first show in Matt's gallery, and it was called Lair. The lair was an idea of a lair to imprison and encourage angels. It was a cave for angels, and this was on one side of the invitation card and a little book of information that a visitor would get after they climbed the sort of 60 or so iron stairs on the outside of the building. What they didn't know was under each stair was a white feather. And when they entered the room, there were a lot of other white feathers. This is an ancient image of a carpet that I've etched into steel and then blackened by heat. This was under the last step before you entered the gallery. So you'd walked on this, you'd walked on the image that you were holding in your hand as you came in, and the book was given to you. The next image in the book was this, which is a calendar, a kind of a timescape, a clocking in of the hours of the day and the week by angels. These are the angels of protection, and this is their duty rota, which is an astonishing idea. So you're confronted by this list of names, which is pretty clear to understand what they are, that they are angels, being told they are, but they're transferable. Now they change from the hours of day to the hours of night is a mysterious and peculiarly normal thing. Inside the gallery, it's blinding. It was very brightly lit. Everything was white. Everything was overlit. Everything was causing the eye problems to focus. On the window, there was a pane on the window, had a feather attached to it. There was a tracing paper hanging down that was moving in the breeze. So the light coming through made the feathers shift in and out of focus as the paper moved backwards and forwards very softly. The things in the room you could barely see. They're made of perspex. They're made of vellum and parchment. And there are a series of objects. There are the kind of things that might encourage an angel to take nest, encourage an angel to settle for a while. It was made in such a way that I was making things at that time and still do to some extent. Because when I bring the material into the studio or the gallery, I let the material speak to me to tell me something about it. I don't just bring it in as a dead thing that I then cut and chop and change and stitch and weld together. So these sheets on the floor, this was vellum made by a master craftsman, Mr. Vorst, who was an Orthodox Jewish man living up in Stoke Newington, who was making these things for sacred books. And he gave them to me, and I brought them back, and I couldn't touch them. I couldn't cut them. I couldn't manipulate them. I put them on the floor and let them tell me what was going to happen. So the objects in the room, the kind of ghosted glass and shadowed objects, came from these sheets that have not been taken for Holy Script. I'm going fast because I've got another 80 pictures to show you. This was a kind of disc that had been dented by something that might be a halo or might be a sperm, something that was circling it and pushing up against the cover behind, which is another sheet of parchment. So the relationship between parchment and plastic is not a good one. but I was trying to find a way to let them speak, to let the materials kind of exchange something about their alienation and something about their peculiarity, and to suggest an intimacy that was not a natural one. The great image, the overpowering image of the flea. This, of course, is a famous drawing taken from, this is a spiritual apparition, the drawing taken from what was supposed to be seen, what Blake said he saw, and drew for his friend, including the detail in the bottom section of the mouth, the vampiristic mouth. But there's something odd about it. There's something odd about the normality, the way his clothes he's wearing. There's something about his posture. This is a man Blake knows. This is a man that Blake has seen in society, as well as being the monster that finally trapped him in his own house. It was said that one of the things that may have influenced him was Hooke's Micrographia. This image from Hooke's book had never been seen before. This vast picture of what a flea looked like under a microscope had never been known. And there's some evidence that Blake saw this. And I thought that was extremely interesting, because he didn't copy it. He didn't make a picture of it. He found something else. He found something in its intensity and perhaps in its personality. And I thought, you know what? That's a really good idea. So to take Blake's advice, I looked to see what was new in the world of the microscope and the flea. And this is what was occurring at that time. This is the head of a flea, which is beyond recognition of anything we could possibly imagine. And I thought it was a wonderful sculptural object. But I wasn't making sculptures, I was making portraits, because Blake's picture of the flea is a portrait. And this is the one that I decided to make. This is the flea in triumph, a terrible creature. And then went on to make a series of things, some of which I threw away and some of which I kept because I think they had more to say to me. So this is the body of the flea. This is it in some kind of recognition of where it is, some kind of recognition of time and the eclipse and the movement of the creature. So this is a shift between being human were fleas and actual scurrying animals. I'm trying to find it. And of course, one of the best ways is to find something is to look to the side of it to see what its companions look like. So this is a mite. This is not a flea. This is a mite in its landscape. I can't describe what it is. You can see what it is. I can only describe what it might be in another place by not talking about the thing itself. And I think this is something that Blake did. I've never had an interest in trying to find the man, because he made so much work to talk about the world he was in or the world that he saw that wasn't about him. I think the fixation of trying to identify him and trying to guess what he was possibly thinking is a complete waste of time. I think he was a grafter, he was a worker, and he produced so many images and so much astonishing stuff. It's not about him, it's being projected from him and outwards, and that's the gift. And that's the only way we're ever going to find any kind of sense of what it means. They become a bit ghost-like in a very different way. While writing these, of course, while painting these, of course, you see, I can't even tell which one is. I can't tell between the writing. I started to write towards it. And so these are bits and pieces from a book called the Pittancer. A Pittancer in a medieval monastery is someone who's getting a little bit of money to buy little things like spice and herbs and flowers to just brighten the food, to brighten the life of those there. And it's a way of just changing the reflection of the normality of the world. And I think Blake was a Pittancer. So I started to write about his paintings. A hutching glow beneath ghetto tar and tiles, embedded in squalor's parlour, far off, a pinprick of cuprous night in the municipality's broth of light. The Flea, common and uncocked at the black gate, newly painted over by a noon wife, almost departed from the hard crawl of the crusted morn, while he, tangoing divine, is Jewish, Bakelite and deliberate, congealed, crying antique, European, fawning east. Our blood shrivels quiescence from the varnish of his gloomy cup, born haughty like a milk lamp, growled of circus on a murder stair. The populace moved in caution at that exchange of light and labour, hushing between the glamour of day and the fierceness of night. You could hear London's breath between its humans at that hour. Even the river held its tides in the deep ragged throat. Thousands of stacked wooden rooms creaked and shuddered around their histories, high in the leaning dark of the tenement of ruin. Its interior walls roughly plastered with brown paper and lit by the groomed candles that cough the copper taste of thick air. He prowls and fawns in an arrogance of sneering isolation, posing before an oval brass mirror that wedges the door closed. He shines in the bitter light, a shellacked parasitic herald, princely in his glut. There are many like him befouling the faint health along the river's edge, and all of them tiptoe in this time of poised, congealed waiting, stretching, waking in the sun's last stain. He turns again, adopting another courtly gesture from the rudiments of the genteel. The attitude is the stance, the compliment retiring. The room holds its dirty voice as he bows, one hand tucked above his wasted band, the other sweeping backwards, gliding sideways, holding the stained bowl like an elegant three-cornered hat. His eyes are turned, he steps carefully backwards, his gaze never leaving the hemorrhage pattern on the floor. Others of his kind will evolve into the different versions. They will all be betrayed by posturing of their hunger, being nocturnal. Is locked deep sleep, is Disney bright. The same dreams of impish atrocity, curdling in a wide American sky. In advance of its blue, he peels the tobacco bark off his face like a nut. The fresh green grins below, newer than animation. The old head is revealed in childlike dynamism. The locust smile of Jiminy Cricket, that little cracked voice, Uncle Safe, and almost giving the game away by wishing on stars. A navigational infestation, plague driven by folded galaxies. Or in Vienna, through another looking glass, where Hitler carbon copies the same stance, grown furious, fist held above his sloping body in a monochrome bullfight pantomime, a mirrored rehearsal of mania, Victorian, wooden, bloodthirsty and impotent, the Flea practicing triumph. This is another Flea bowl. This one was made, it's a calmer object. It's almost like a more sophisticated implement, a more sophisticated tool that had taken on some of the characteristics of the creature who owned it and used it. Again, it's used at different kinds of perspex, but I tried to use that material against itself, try and turn it into bone or to ivory, and twist it. These are very physical things by hand. Twist it in such a way that I'm using temperature and force to stain it, to make it not a pure plastic object. That was very badly said. It has a reflecting bowl in the center of it, and then these implements, as if they all come together and have a purpose. And they do, but I don't know what that is. The Flea might, but it's got a dark interior, and it's got a kind of anatomical hunger. The details are one of the corners of the thing. This little hook, this little thing, is actually taken from an 18th century tool which I bought and transformed. I cannibalized it. I wanted something of the time of Blake to be actually in the object. Not all objects are made to last. Not all objects are made to be contained or to be owned. In fact, none of them are made to be owned. But it's sometimes they're about being alive and existing for a very short time. And those things are often called props when they're attached to a performance. But I don't have a clarification between prop and a sculptural object when it's used in performance. These things were made for a commission called Small Acts at the Millennium, where a group of artists were asked to make responses to the change, to the great rolling of the century. And I wanted to make something about recognition and bewilderment, something where, when seeing people on the street, seeing people sleeping, seeing people tucked under benches, how you knew they were people, how you knew they weren't bundles, how you knew they weren't pieces of object, that they actually had existence. So I wanted to blur the territory, and I wanted to make a moving itinerant performance, where a kind of hit and run thing, where I would make things that no one knew. This was never announced. I would just arrive and do something. So in one level, it's just some lunatic in a corner doing something. And on another level, I'm trying to attach to the place. I'm going to show you a little bit of film from this, which is my performance, part of my performance in Bun Hill Fields, in sight of Blake's supposed grave at that time. These works are made in Cambridge and London, and they were photographed and filmed by a group of people which I had no control over. That was their job, not mine. And I would just go from one place to another and make these things happen. At the end, I retrieved all the evidence and I used it as recorded glimpses to try to construct something. I didn't use it as not just substance, but it was the motive and the narrative of the film. So the thing was invented from these extracts and from what I saw about the places I was in. I'm now going to give you a tiny taste of this. The Sleeping Stone tomb is, of course, Bunyan, who is also in Bunhill Fields. And it seemed he and Defoe and Blake, it's an accumulator, that place, a battery, and it's still ticking over. The invention of demons and angels, the imaginative construction, the making such things plausible is always been significant to me, and still is. I mean, it's very uncool, I guess, to be still painting demons and angels these days, but that doesn't bother me in the least. It's, and Blake, and if you have any doubts about that, you could just go back and look at Blake at any time, because these things are still so fresh and still being used by all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. But he's not the only one. There are other great demons and angels in the world. This is Uccello. This is the five miracles of the desecrated host. And an extraordinarily weird little painting. Landscape and architecture kind of fused and broken, but some kind of squabble over a dead person. But the angels seem calm and the demons seem rather busy, but they've been scratched. Their surface has been scratched, almost like they've been trying to be scratched out. Now, I don't think that was the artist, but I don't know. But it's a very interesting thing. And one of the only ways to find out is to repaint it. So I did, and separated their wings and separated their bodies. So their wings have one conversation in the back of the landscape, and their bodies have another one at the side of the table, but there is no body. This is called Unshrivened with Company. And that's kind of all I'm going to say about it. It's, if it works, its atmosphere and its mystery will combine to kind of keep the story going. Now we have something very different. I've never showed this. This is kind of thing. Okay, Blake would like this. This is a mistake. This is a disaster. These are the angels in the Royal Academy, in the biggest gallery space in the Royal Academy, as angels on its ceiling that line it. And I was asked to become part of the summer show. And in the beginning, I said, I'd love to make a piece in this room, a sculpture in this room that responds to the angels. What a good idea. Yes, yes, of course, of course. So I did. So I made something for this room and for those angels. And I loved making it. It was a reconstruction, but in a very different way. It wasn't like one of them had fallen off the wall. It was like one on the way down, it turned into something else. So it was constructed, and the idea was it went into the gallery and lived with the other sculptures and things in that gallery. The public walked around and examined it. But every so often, like once, 2 or 3 times a month, I would come in and I would make it become alive. And I worked that out how to do it. And I had the mechanisms all completely contained. It was ready to go. And it would startle the audience by the fact it could move its wings and it could have a life that was not mechanical. So it was a pleasure to make, and actually constructed very lightweight material, then covered, so it looked like very heavy material. It looked like clay, and it looked like stone. It looked like gold, and it was finished, and it was a big, big thing. It filled my studio, and it went along to the show. And I thought I'm going ahead of myself. You can see I'm kind of copying some of the features, and then purposely distorting them. So it's a kind of partial reality to the thing on the wall. So it arrives on site. There it is on its stretcher, waiting for my telephone call for me to go in and put it into place. And then it all went wrong. An whole series of things changed, an whole series of curatorial decisions and technical things changed. So in fact, there were no sculptures being shown in that gallery, and I was asked if I could show it in another one. Impossible. It was made for the angels there, it couldn't go anywhere else. So there was suggested a series of compromises, how it might work, how it might become this, how it might become that. And in the end, I was offered a site underneath a sort of a 14-foot fiberglass copy of the Pink Panther. At which point I went, no. This is, I don't make things for circuses and end of pier shows. So it's over, it's done. It can't come back to me. It doesn't live anywhere else. It was born for this one room to come alive in this one room. So I then said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to chuck it. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, no, just get rid of it, chuck it into skip. It has no function anymore. So I had to sign many papers to allow this to happen, and walked away, and it went. It was gone. It disappeared. But nothing ever disappears, really. So the images I had photographed of it, I still liked some of the elements of. I'd forgotten about that angel. That angel never took flight. Something like it one day might, who knows. So I had these pictures, I'm making composites, photographs of these things, and then drawing over and painting them. And I developed a technique of etching, of making prints. Blake invented processes all the time. Every day he was trying these things out. I'm not attempting to be, I'm suggesting I'm anywhere like it or that ability. What this is that image made on paper. It's engraved. It's engraved by a laser. So the machine is cutting the surface of the paper in a very minute way. And the color tonation is caused by burning. So there's no ink, there's none of that in the process. That's all caused by removing the surface of the paper and scorching it. And those sometimes inventing processes like that gives you a way of re-understanding the image, of coming to terms with what's actually there and where it may go next. This is another. And at this point, I suddenly realized I recognized something else. These are two poems from the Pittancer. And it's about Peckham Rye. It's about, I grew up in South London, knew Peckham Rye. It was not full of angels and trees, very far from it. But every time I walked there, once I knew that Blake had seen them, I always wondered which tree it was. Could it be the same tree? Could it exist? Could its roots be there, even if the tree wasn't? So I wrote these two little pieces. From out the mouth cuts a bit of call, ink hidden in boiled and drained angels' sleeves, sitting in that now unlikely tree, the rye ghost, love and hate tattooed on either hand, hands matured with the wood, polished to talon more than bless. It is suited dummy, fastened tourist to a scarecrow's sight, propped to clue the quarried vision's tilt. Fake as the poet's stone, name carved in absence of the body's scent. The true intelligence is graced elsewhere. The tree itself was shuddered out, inverted, its gestures in vaulted mirrors beneath the pitched soil. The roots describing the exact branches of that day, the very twigs configured to the moment that he saw, woven between the wind and the rain, a smile in the trembling leaves. Today, the needles and dog shit calligraphed a signature on that spot, over the stump sealed by a scarring of indifference, time's insolent lime. The roots have twitched, sucking right down to beckon and wave in another light, compressed by the darker groaning loam, squeezed into sound and a raking opposition of shadows that flatter the illumination of worms in this little land of hearing. This is another performance which has only happened once because lockdown kind of locked it down. But this is David Tolley's portrait of me making it in the studio as a kind of a rehearsal for the real thing. again, putting it through process like Blake did, putting it through different ways of seeing it and rewriting it, retelling the story, pushing it through the same engraving of paper. So it becomes this tiny surface, these tiny surface activities that hold the image. And then in reverse, painting it, actually painting the image as if it was a still life sitting before me. The angel thing continues, it keeps going on, and I realize how much biblical stuff there is here and how much that kind of goes, but it goes beyond the biblical thing, it goes further, but sometimes it comes back. This is called Visitation. I don't know what it's about, but it's a visitation. And it's taken from pictures of certain things that have been, certain buildings and certain paintings that have been resurrected. This is called Lost Angel Found. And it's another kind of landscape, it's another building, it's another structure in which to walk into, and it's busy, it's active between Earth and somewhere else, it's thriving, and our part and our position to enter it is one of pure imagination. Sometimes someone offers you a challenge, which is a fundamental challenge. I was offered, I'd made a processional cross for a friend of mine who died in Dorchester Abbey. This became known, and I was asked if I would consider making a processional cross for St. Martin's in the Field, which I found a very interesting challenge. A cross is 2 pieces of wood, but St. Martin's in the Field is a very particular place. It's known for several things. One of the things it's known for is its charity and its work with homeless people. Now, if somebody had a faith enough to want to make a crucifix or make a cross, how would they make it if they had no materials, they had no skills, they had nothing with 2 pieces of wood and a piece of string? So this was my beginning to make the cross of poverty, a processional cross that was actually the cross of poverty. So I started to experiment by making different forms of crosses. And once you start to play on this thing, you know, it's a fundamental image, You can't get more simpler than 2 pieces of cross wood. But once you start to play with that, all kinds of other possibilities come forward. Eventually coming to this one and adding the third element. The third element was St. Martin's cloak. St. Martin's gave his cloak to a beggar. He made himself semi-naked to give his cloak to a beggar. Now, if I added a third element to a cross that wasn't the body, but was something else, it means that when you carry it through space, aloft, it becomes a 3-dimensional object, not a flat thing, not a 2-dimensional object. So these were the pieces of wood and the string, the final decision, that were then turned into a more solid material. So this is the process. I normally make them with my own hands. I don't farm them out to be structured for me, but sometimes they need to be, if they need to be made to last. This had to be made of the material. And it couldn't be made of gold or bronze or those things because they're too heavy. You couldn't carry it. So it's aluminium. It's on its way to becoming aluminium that's covered in gold. And it keeps all of its original surface and all its original sculptural movement and form. And when the gold is put on, this is called moon gold. It's a very light coloured gold. It suddenly changes the object completely, and it becomes, you're not sure what you're seeing anymore. And when you see it processed in the church, and when you see it behind the altar, from a distance, it looks like an ornate medieval cross. And as you get close to it, it then becomes 3 pieces of wood tied together in string. Okay, we're nearing the end. I wanted to show a comparison and an opposite. This is called Blind Crook. It is a crook. It is like a shepherd's crook, but a big one. And the bottom half of it is white, signifying a white man's blind man's stick, the white of the blind man's stick. But the white is coming from its interior. There are holes and little fissures in this that have leaked the whiteness. So its blindness has come from the inside. I guess it's a political work. You wouldn't trust this shepherd. But I want it to be a kind of artifact that's a sort of remnant. In most crude form, it's a remnant of bad leadership. But I wanted it still to have a majesty, a kind of presence. We are nearing the end. Okay, the Vor. I wrote these 3 books, or rather, they used me to write them. I never remember having making any decision about that. They just occurred. I'm going to finish by reading the opening section of the Erstwhile. Blake was there in it. He was an implication. He was there as a presence. In the first book, I used real people like Muybridge and William Gull, and so in every book I wanted to be a kind of a real person in with fictional ones. Blake was never to be it. I was greatly encouraged by my editors to really reconsider this, and that they practically accused me of being cowardly by not bringing him in, because they said I was skirting the issue. And I thought, well, okay, that's a challenge. All right, if I can do it in the opening section, he's in, but not for a lot, because I'm not writing pictures of Blake. I'm not going to tell you who he is. That's for you to decide by the work he makes. So I'm going to read this opening section. It's a couple of pages, and then leave you to think what you think. This is where the man beast crawls, its once virtuous body turned inside out, made raw and skinless, growing vines and sinews backwards through the flesh, stiff primordial feathers pluming in its lungs, thorns and rust knotted to barbed wire in its loins. Guilt and fear have gnawed the fingers tips away to let the claws hook out into talons, sharpened by digging a home in the shallow grave. It is seen on all fours, naked and worse across the broken ground, on sharp knees which are red raw from chiseling the earth to gain some purchase. Prowling inside a trench that owns the gluttony of night, but blinded by a stark glare of explosions. A bellowing flash sculpts the rippling muscle on its back and arms and the thick prophet hair that has become soured by warfare into twitching dreadlocks. Mud-filled like the beard of dribble and tangled ginger grit. But it is the face that alarms, skinned alive by shock, the eyes terrified in the sudden phosphorus glare, ultimately lost and forever in the gutter of the staring, ultimately lost and forever in the gutter of the staring that has emptied its skull. The small balding man made a further adjustment to the expression, widening the pupils, setting them in a squint, looking in different directions to give insight into the mind's cleaving. He then stepped away from the table where the picture had been made and nodded to himself, his ink-stained fingers rubbing his chin. Yes, it was almost ready to be finalised for printing. A small noise on the other side of the room made him look up and drag his comment into the open to be reluctantly shared. I say it's almost ready to be finalised. Someone or something was draped against the shabby curtain that saturated the stink of London. The artist took the picture from the table and held it up to emphasise his words. I never looked like that. But it's halfway there. You have caught me between worlds, up river when I left the great forest, and down river after you have gone and left me here alone and all the other rumour who have sailed over to the dolphins' land to be torn apart in the mud. It was difficult to understand the model because he had been speaking in the vocabulary of shadows, and the waning day outside was blurring the edges of their meaning. The night closed slower then, the eyes calibrated to dusk, and all the nuances that since been removed and exiled by the illumination of gas and electricity. The city in those times was encrusted in ancient gloom, and small wicks of whale oil lamps that glowed in every tarry hutch did little but smoke glitter to the polished coral of London's darkness. A blind man, and there were many then, could tell you the time of day by the change of smell. The whale oil smuggled its stench against all the departing light. The city chorus of scents rose with a faint glow to its burning. In sympathy, there was a change of sound. The populace moved in fierce caution. Labour shifted its stance and changed its rhythm between the clamour of day and the saturation of night. You could hear the city breathe in its humanity at this hour. Even the river listened and held its tides, its deep, ragged throat a moment, before reversing its might under the command of the hidden moon. On the banks of the Thames, thousands of stacked wooden rooms creaked and shuddered around their histories. In this room, the model's statement about the future war had not been understood. The model had not yet learnt language, especially the peculiar one murmured and chewed on the Surrey side of the great river. So he spoke through the artist's mind without words, which made the artist's mouth work unconsciously, trying to catch the sounds in its shaping, like an old person or a concentrating child. Eventually his own thoughts and words allowed to flow back. But it is you, exactly as you described it, as you looked before you found me. It's you leaving that forest, the thunder and the lightning, fleeting the ver, speaking of vor, came the answer, vor, and I did not flee. This was announced in careful curves with new insistence, and its pressure forced the artist to drop the picture he held from his head. The abruptness surprised the last particles of day, making her fall loose from the bitter settings in the dingy room. Do not write my name on this. If you must show it to others, say it's someone else. But who, what? Asked the confused artist. Someone nothing else looks like this. Then hide it, bury it under the others, show no one, burn it. But it shows another face of God, the artist said. God in the beast and man declining, falling from grace. The model maintained his clarity while dissolving into the gloom. An ancient king, he thought, tossing it back in the wake of his leaving, and the wisp of it undid the pain in the artist's temples. He took his hands down and looked at his stained fingers, as if trying to match the same darkness in the pigment that was growing in the room. He then looked up to find the silhouette of the companion of being that had called himself an angel, but none was there. He bent back to the picture. I will call it Nebuchadnezzar, he quietly called out, in the way one speaks to the final closed door of a departed lover, the fleeing absence of a once attended listener. It became one of William Blake's greatest works. Thank you. Do I have to...
Thank you, Brian. Wonderful talk. If I can invite everyone to turn on your cameras, but not your microphones. We are now going to have an opportunity to ask questions of Brian and discuss and raise issues that you want to talk about. If you could use the hand signal if you want to ask a question. That would really help. Victor Rees.
Hello. I'd like to say,
Brian, can you turn your camera
thank you
on?
to Brian for that fantastic talk. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Brian and a huge thank you to you, Tim, for organising this. It's been a fascinating evening. And I really wanted to just ask something on the question of interdisciplinary overlap, because it seems in your practice and in Blake's practice that this kind of blending or this fusion of different mediums is a hugely important element. And I wanted to ask, why do you think it is important to blend mediums, to have something that's interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary? I think it's muted.
Brian, you're muted.
I don't know, because I don't think it was ever a decision. I think it's automatic. I think there's something in the rotation of images that you can't leave them alone. I mean, to say Blake was an obsessive is an understatement. But so those images roll by day and night. They roll through consciousness, they roll through dream. So what choice do you have? It's not like you're going to say, I'm going to do this and this. Never, ever that. You just do it because that's what you're here for. That's the work. And one thing instigates another, one thing clarifies another. You know, a poem comes from a picture comes from a poem. The performance, sometimes things happen in performance where you have no idea where it came from. And you go, oh, I think I painted that, you know, and it's all the other way around. And I think I recognize that in Blake. I think there's a recognition. It's a recognition of repetition, but it's not the boring kind of repetition. It's a repetition of things ricocheting and having to be caught and developed, caught and developed. So it's more like a task than a decision, I think.
Thank you.
This doing business is very weird. Huh?
Another question, please.
It's not compulsory.
We're obviously all struck dumb, Brian. There are no questions. There are no answers. We accept that.
Peter, hello.
Hi.
No, I didn't see you.
It was a beautiful thing.
Well, your quote I use all the time, imagination is a muscle that increases with exercise, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who I stole that from, but it's a good one.
You stole it very well. It's yours.
Anyway, congratulations. Lovely stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have another question from Diane Eagles.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for the whistle-stop tour of a lot of work. a lot of it. I've been looking. It's astonishing in its breadth, and I wanted to pick up your comment about the previous questioner and the diversity of the work, and how do you appraise work if it is coming from something of your unconscious, or it's making itself, if you like. How do you then shape that or decide when something is fits or it seems right or complete, if it's shaping you rather than you shaping it?
Good question. I think the first, it changed slightly in the asking, but I think the first thing is critical faculty. That whatever it is, whatever its intensity is, it's got to work. So there's got to be a kind of critical faculty about that you don't. There's a gate on it. There's an interrogation of it. And I think there's two kinds of interrogation. There's a conscious one in the studio when you're making things, put them together to see if they come together. And there's the one when you sleep. And then somewhere between the two, those two things come, and if they work, they bind. Now, I don't really have a clear answer for you on this, I'm afraid. I've never analysed it. I've been too busy making it. I think in a way that's the job of the artist, is to just make the bloody stuff. It's somebody else's job to perhaps explain how it's made. But if I often say, can I get in trouble now? But I often, when artists talk to me about doing a PhD, I say, don't. If you want to be an artist, continue to be an artist, don't do a PhD, because it will force you to analyze your work through another series of gates, and it may shred it. You've got to be very strong and very determined to separate those things. I think these things are fragile. I think the things we make and how we make them are fragile. We get tough doing it over the years. But it's, I think you can have a strong critical faculty that guides the work and disciplines it, but it mustn't choke it. That didn't answer your question at all, did it? I mean, basically, because I don't know.
I think it did. I think it did. In fact, it's more of an answer than I was expecting, because it's a bit of a riddle, really. I'm aware it's a riddle. I was interested to hear your comments on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diane. And now, if we could have Jennifer Jesse.
Hello.
Thank you so much for that incredible presentation. I was so energized by the way you relate to the materials that present themselves to you. And I want to describe that as a mystical relationship, a mystical sense. Is that how you might describe it, or is that question even meaningless to ask?
No, it's not meaningless. I mean, I wouldn't use that term. I've always said I kind of make things through Gnostic principles. In that, you know, I'm trying to use things to explain, to open wisdom, to open, to increase imagination. So the more you increase imagination, the more it increases imagination. So there is a mystical element to it. I wouldn't want to claim anything about that. It's something that drives me. It's something I read. It's something I have interest in. It's something I recognize in other works, and certainly works outside of a contemporary art film, contemporary art time. But I do believe that if an object or a picture is right, it has a life beyond its physical presence. That it can hold an energy, it contain a vibration, and that's why I've never really been very good at business or very good at that kind of stuff, because that kills it stone dead. So I've always avoided that, much to my present position, but it's I think there are more. Oh God, I'm going way off. No, let me go back to you. I think there are more important things than the matter-of-fact way we describe things, and I think sometimes they're called mystical. And the world hasn't always believed it's been constructed the way we all told it's constructed now. There are other elements which guided it for thousands of years, which are completely different.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Lisa Cole.
Hello. So I went to way too many Catholic schools, so I'm now an atheist. But all the way through, we were taught that angels are these things that are pulling people up to the heavens. Yeah. But I'm completely enamored with this way that you're trying to make nests and you're trying to lure them back down. Could you talk a little bit more about that, please? That was fascinating.
It's to do with, I think, that our notions of angel, our notions of materiality. I mean, I'm using, basic materials, steel, plastic and things, but if you get the resonances right and you get the forms right, people they vibrate with other people's imaginations. The idea is to not make something that's a demonstration of me, is to make something in the Gnostic sense that allows people to make it vibrate with their intellect, with their imagination, so it can be shared, and it vibrates, it goes on and on. And that's a way of luring an angel. I mean, I had an interesting conversation with, oh God, it's got out of my head. The Irish lady who sees angels every day. Oh, what's she called? Help me, somebody. Byrne. Lorna Byrne. Do you not know of her? But this is oh, she's wonderful. This is a lady who's written 3 books. She comes from a very basic working class family. And she sees angels daily, every moment. And you can think what you want about that, but I mean, I'm totally convinced she does. And there's been people through history who see things that other people can't see. But it's very interesting when you meet someone who says the same things that Blake says. But it's there now, I can't do it. I can't do that. I've got to make it. I've got to make it out of stuff, boring stuff. I mean, I'm using primal and base material to try to elevate it as a vibratory condition to attract people's imagination, to attract the evolution of imagination, and to attract the angels that thereby protect that. Lorna Byrne, worth a look. The church hater.
That's amazing. Thank you. I'll Google her. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. And now, can I ask Nick Medford to ask his question?
Thanks very much for that extraordinary series of words and images. I think my question is kind of similar to the lady who asked about the word mystical, except I want to ask about the word alchemical.
Yeah.
Because you used that word at the beginning of the talk about the ghost of a flea. And I was struck actually in your answer to the previous question, you used the word base material, prime material.
Yeah.
So, yeah, perhaps so. But I just wanted to ask a bit more about that, because the way that you use materials and use the word Gnostic as well, it does seem to have a kind of alchemical aspect to it, and I'm just curious to know what you would say about that.
It does. It does. It's not. I don't have a set of beliefs that I adhere to. I try to understand as much as I can, read as much as I can. And coming back to things of believing that not a lot of things around us are not dead tissue and not inert substances. And this was a belief that was held in the world for a long, long time. I mean, it's only the mechanical universe which tells us it's not that. But quantum mechanics doesn't, of course, it tells us something else. So it's, but I'm just a sculptor. I'm a basic artist making things in a very traditional way. I mean, I put things together to make images and objects from materials and pigments, which try to become more than they are. I mean, I think most good artists try to do that. They're not just interested in making copies of the world. They want to make things which have their own life. And alchemical things are extremely interesting to me. They are. I mean, people said about my writing, oh, you can tell you're a sculptor because it's got so much stuff and material in it. And I say, yeah, probably that's true, but I didn't know that. The fact that stuff isn't inert and it's sort of changing and moving all the time. I mean, it's a very simple thing. Like if you say to someone, okay, Joseph Boyce did it very well. If you say to someone, you've got a hand, one end you've got mercury, and the other end you've got chalk. What happens? There is no answer, but you've got to imagine holding mercury and chalk. And there's something in that moment of holding it and imagining it that makes something come alive, a kind of an accumulator, a battery. And that's just words. So, and I guess that there's an alchemical principle. I mean, I'm not looking for gold. When I came to Oxford and people said to me, oh, you come for John Ruskin. I said, no. John Ruskin would turn his grave at me. I come for Dr. D, and I came for Ashmole, and I came for all those others. I came for the Pitt Rivers Museum. That's the kind of foundation I'm interested in. And Bacon, I mean, it's still there, and it works.
Thanks very much.
That's right.
Thank you, Nick. In the chat, there's a long question from Adam Daly. Is Adam, would you like to ask your question?
It's a long one.
Adam, if you'd raise your hand in the reactions bar.
Adam's saying he has no microphone, Tim, so maybe if you want to read the question out.
This is Adam Daly's question. You mentioned that you don't see objects as they are, but as something else. Blake, of course, created his own mythos, as you have too, and this transcends allegory. The self confronts the not self, and the possibility of origination occurs in this realm. But the self is larger than the ego, and the anthropomorphic has to give way to the alien. Is this where art and religion meet? Or can we go further still and unleash impossible visions of other dimension?
That's not a question.
It's a PhD.
That's a statement. Yes. Yes. You just did it. I'm sorry, that was I couldn't paraphrase that. It said it, that's it. I'm not backing down. It's just it's too good. It's got it. No, don't be sorry. No, it's good. It's good. You're next week, next month.
While we're waiting for the next question, please. I was personally curious about your reworking of Uccello's image into the unshrivened.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that a little, or what do you think Uccello thought about it?
I mean, those images, I have no protection against images like that. I don't go looking at an artist like art history. I look at all art, I look at all art, and then something jumps out at you like that, and it jumps out of you, and it demands understanding, and it demands, but the understanding is always secondary to the effect it's had. I mean, it's like a Francis Bacon painting, you know, that's not about, you don't understand it. It comes out and it grabs you by the short and curlies. You know, then you have to think about it, then you have to make sense of it. Then some of those Renaissance ones, especially that particular, I mean, well, Uccello had his own, I mean, he was a master anyway, but there are things there are things in composition between landscape and action, which is so intriguing. You're drawn into it like this. You're just looking, and it's already happening. And so I had to make a version of it, not to repaint, but to place myself somewhere near it. Interestingly, I've just started doing the same thing with Paul Nash, who's an incredibly different artist, and they made no claim for anything mystical at all in his work, but it's there. There are certain English things there which kind of Blakean of magic are actually in the paintings. But he would never talk about it. He would never have any dealings with those. But they're uncoverable. But for me, it's not an intellectual pursuit. It's something I have to do. I have to do physically. I have to make it. I have to kind of look through it and touch it and pick up a paintbrush and stuff to be able to find it.
Thank you.
There are 2 or 3 others I've stolen from as well.
We've got some questions appearing in the chat. Alexa Barrett, would you like to speak your question?
No microphone, it says.
Ah, thank you. So shall I read it aloud, if I may? Alexa Barrett asks, Brian, you've spoken about your role of teacher in art schools as being to refract the students' own practice back at them, so they may see what was already there. Do you think this is what Blake's work has been for your own?
Yes. Yeah, but there's an enormous time span. I mean, there's some of Blake's images and some of his words come through like an express train, and some fade into obscurity. And that motion between one thing and another is always hypnotic, because the deeper you get, the more you look, the more you read, the more that motion occurs between a simple statement, a clarity, and something which is actually impossible to understand. But I think that's, but I'm not going to look at that through the personality of the man, because I know nothing about that. I never will. I can only do it through the work. So, sorry, I'm going away from the question. Yes, but one thing with teaching is it's an immediate thing. It's between 2 people. It's an immediate thing in the same room. But I think Blake, like my son, being a Pittancer, of adding these little bits of cherishes, little bits of spice, these little bits of vision, these little bits of thing continually builds a better overall thing for the communities that take him on. No, that sounded awful. Sorry, that sounded like some public health statement. God, what's happening to me? All this stuff coming out, it's poison. I'm sorry, that was a really bad. Yes, is the answer. But it's from a very long distance. And maybe it's a boomerang rather than a kind of mesmeric influence.
Thank you. I believe there's a question from Liam, who has a microphone. Liam.
No microphone, he says.
I'm trying to find Liam's question. Here, let me read it aloud. Which is more important to your art, reason or magic? Or is chance and place a kind of magic?
Magic is more important than reason. Absolutely. We are bombarded by reason. The machines we're talking to each other on, wonderful things that they are devotees of reason. But they're not the only way. I mean, one of the things I have a bit of a problem with, I do not underestimate computers, and I thank God for my laptop. I wouldn't be able to write anything without it. But there's a channeling of thinking when kids at an early age are kind of thinking through this, not thinking through things in their hands, not thinking through tactile, haptic understanding. It's all part of one thing, but once you, the jeopardy is you remove it by entirely using machines of reason.
Thank you. We have a hand raised from Valerie. Please.
Hello, hi. Do you use your own dreams or your lucid dreams? And do you have an urge to transport these into our own illusions?
No, I up to quite recently, I've never remembered my dreams. I was convinced for years I didn't dream. It's only recently that state between being awake and being asleep, things have crossed over, and they've crossed over in some kind of irregular way. So I've had my first visions in that I don't know what place I saw the thing in. I actually don't know what place I saw. I know it couldn't have been in my bedroom, walking up to it and going like this. I know it couldn't. It wasn't there. But it was also not in the condition of dream that I understand it being. So perhaps the boundary between those things is becoming devolved, is becoming weakened. And I mean, I've always been convinced artists work as much when they're asleep as when they're awake. I mean, for example, if I have to, if I'm cooking for people the next night and I'm working on a poem and doing a painting, they will all talk to each other in the middle of the night and sometimes wake me up in a confused condition, which I just find wonderful. I mean, it doesn't annoy me, but it doesn't make any sense either. It's making sense on the other side of it. And I certainly wouldn't insist that my dreams are informative to people or have some kind of, they're not, I'm not saying what Blake said, they're not visions. They're not visions to be given as enlightenment. If there's any enlightenment at all, it comes through the work. And that's again what I like about Blake, because what he says is one thing, but he was a grafter. He spent most of his time making really appalling pictures for other people. In a tiny room, he spent all of his time making other people's images so he could make, so he had space to make his own. And then he makes ecstatic visions. And I think there's something in losing yourself in the work. You know, that wonderful thing when the inner chatter stops. And the time disappears, daylight goes, oh, it's nighttime, what have we been doing? Because you stop talking to yourself inside and you're talking to something exterior through your hands or through your pen or through whatever. But I don't think it's something I don't want to preach it, and I don't want to suggest it's any greater and take it as a kind of, I'm not saying it's a wisdom, here's a wisdom, I have a wisdom. That's why I like teaching, because I don't do it anymore, but it's about letting people see their self. And there's one wonderful thing I have to tell you, one wonderful thing really works. Someone who has doubts about their work, they say, you know, wanting to make this thing, but you know, I don't think it's very good. I don't think I can do it. It's basically because someone's told them they can't. So the answer is, so, okay, be somebody else and then make it. Put somebody else's name on it and go away, be George, not Anna. Make it. And they make it. It's entirely theirs.
Thank you, Brian. Everyone, we're reaching the end of our allotted time, and it's my delight to thank Brian Catling for this wonderful evening. When he was younger, he was very much interested in pickpocketing, the criminality of pickpocketing, but he reversed it. Instead of surreptitiously taking things from people's pockets, he would put things surreptitiously into them. And so in the days and weeks and months to come, in the folds of your brain, in the pockets of your coat, have a look, see what is there. Brian, everyone, thank you everyone for tonight, and we look forward to seeing you in January. Good night.
Thank you. Total pleasure.